Hey everyone, I'm GT, and in this video I'm going to show you how to update the firmware on your Analogue Pocket handheld and how to install different FPGA cores so that you can enjoy games from consoles like the Super Nintendo right in the palm of your hands. Now we're going to be using the program called Pocket Sync made by Neil Morrison44, as I've personally found that this is the easiest of all the programs to use to do this. I've included some links in the description below for Pocket Sync and for Analogue's latest firmware. I hope this tutorial helps you out. Let's get to it. The only hardware you'll need for this project is your Analogue Pocket console, a micro SD card, an SD card reader, and a Windows 10 or Windows 11 computer. To start, we'll insert the micro SD card into the SD card adapter, and then insert the entire SD card adapter into the SD card reader on our computer. Now we'll head over to the File Explorer in Windows and select This PC. Your SD card should pop up in the Devices and Drives section. Right-click on the SD card and select Format. On this window that pops up, go to the File System dropdown and make sure that exFAT is selected. You can now select Start at the bottom of this window, and then select OK on the next two boxes that pop up. Now that our SD card is formatted and ready, we can head over to our web browser and go to Analogue's website to download the latest firmware. As of January 17, 2024, the latest firmware version is 2.1. I've included a link to this download site in the description. Now select Download, and from here we'll head back to our Windows File Explorer and go to our Downloads folder. Next, we'll drag and drop the firmware file that we downloaded right onto our SD card. Once our firmware file is finished copying to the SD card, we can go back to this PC and right-click on our SD card and select Eject. We can now remove our SD adapter from the computer and then remove our micro SD card from the adapter. Next, we'll insert our micro SD card into our Analogue Pocket to start updating the firmware. You'll hear a light clicking sound when your micro SD card is properly inserted. Next, press the power button on the left side of the console and your firmware update will begin. My firmware update took about 3 minutes to complete, but I've sped this up for the video. If you're finding this tutorial helpful, please be sure to drop a like on this video and consider subscribing to my channel. This is my very first YouTube video and I appreciate your support. Once our firmware update is complete, we should be at the main menu of the Analogue Pocket. From here, we can power down our console and eject our micro SD card. Let's reinsert our micro SD card back into our SD adapter. We'll set this aside for now and head back to Windows. Now we can head over to Neil Morrison44's GitHub page and download the .exe file for Pocket Sync. Use the link in the description below. Your computer may flag this as a potentially dangerous or suspicious file, but this file is safe and you can click download anyway. Let's go back to our File Explorer and select our Downloads folder. Here you'll see the newly downloaded Pocket Sync executable. Click on this and Windows will probably try to block you from installing it, but you can select More Info and Run anyway. We'll select the Next button twice to install this to the default location of Windows. Then press Install, and when it's finished, you can select Next again and then press the Finish button to launch Pocket Sync. With the program successfully installed, we can now reinsert our SD adapter with micro SD card inside of it back into our computer. Windows should now read your SD card again. And we're going to make sure that our firmware is successfully installed by going back to our File Explorer and clicking on our SD card again. It should look something like this now that the firmware is installed properly. Next, we'll go back to PocketSync and press the button that says Connect to Pocket. From here, we'll select our SD card on the left, and then press the button that says Select Folder. Your SD card is now connected to PocketSync. The first thing I like to do is go down to Settings, and from the body drop-down on the top, select the color that matches the console that you have. I have the glow-in-the-dark console, and I really enjoy the matching theme. By clicking on Firmware, we can verify that we are indeed using the latest version, and read patch notes for this and previous versions. You can even back up your game save data using PocketSync, but we're not going to cover that in this video. Let's head over to Cores so we can start downloading our Super Nintendo. At the time that I'm creating this video, there are 118 different FPGA cores included in your installation of PocketSync. It's pretty incredible. But for now, we're just going to stick to Super Nintendo. The SNES core should be right at the top of the list. You can also type in SNES on the search bar at the top. Select the SNES core, and then press the Install button on the top right. Then press Confirm on the window that pops up. And there you have it. The SNES core is now installed on your Analogue Pocket's microSD card. Let's head over to the Games section of the program. As you can see, our Super Nintendo core says we have no games currently. Click on this core to bring up the default file location to save your ROMs to. Now you can find your ROM, right-click, and select Copy. Then go back to the default file location I mentioned for the SNES core and paste it in. I can't tell you how to obtain these, but I will say that you should always obtain your ROMs legally for games that you actually physically own. I own a physical copy of Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo, so this is a perfect example for our tutorial video. Before we play, let's go back and grab a few more FPGA cores. I'm going to install the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance cores from the developer Spiritualized. You're going to use the same exact steps that you used to install your Super Nintendo core. Just click on the Game Boy, click Install in the top right, and then click Confirm in the box that pops up. Follow these same steps for the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance. All three of our Game Boy cores are now installed, but we're going to need to install different BIOS files for each of them. When I click on the individual cores, there's a section that says Required Files with a red blinking box next to them. Now, depending on where you are in the world, it is not always legal to download potentially copyrighted BIOS files. If you're comfortable doing this, proceed to the Settings section and highlight the URL, then paste it into the box below and click the Save button on the right. Now we can return to our individual GameBoy cores and install our BIOS files. Click on the blinking red box from before, and then select Download All on the window that pops up. You can now press the Close button on the left side of the window, and you'll notice that the required files section is no longer blinking red. It should say 1-for-1 files now. This indicates that our BIOS file was successfully installed, and we can go ahead and do this for our other two GameBoy cores now. Now, I'm not going to install any GameBoy ROMs in this video, but if you would like to, you can follow the exact same steps that we used to install a Super Nintendo ROM to install ROMs for your GameBoy cores. Let's eject our SD card in the File Explorer again, and then remove our SD card adapter and remove our micro SD card from the adapter again. Now it's finally time to reinsert our micro SD card that's loaded with cores, ROMs, and BIOSes back into our Analogue pocket. Now we can power on the console and head over to the OpenFPGA option on our main menu. We have three options on this next menu: All, Console, and Handheld. Let's select All to show all the cores that we installed today. If I select Console, it only shows me the Super Nintendo core, and if I select Handheld, it shows me the 3 GameBoy cores that we installed. Now I'm selecting Console, SNES, and then Run, and then I can select the ROM that I installed. I'm pretty excited to play. The game loaded up almost instantly, and it really looks amazing on this screen. I think I'm going to take a screenshot. To do this, I'm going to press the middle of the 3 buttons on the bottom, and then press the button to the right of it. Now I can also change the screen's filters. I'll press the middle button again, and press right and then left on the D-pad to change between the 2 filters. And there you go. You should be all set up to play your favorite Super Nintendo and Game Boy games on your Analogue Pocket. Now I personally love this thing and I can't get enough of it. If you found this video helpful, feel free to drop a like and subscribe if you want to see more content. And you can also leave a comment below with any suggestions of other tech and gaming tutorials you'd like to see me create. Thanks again for watching. I'm GT and I hope you enjoy the game.